The first sign something was wrong was the lock that wouldn't turn. Standing at my own front door, I jiggled the key again, then checked the brass numbers mounted on the weathered oak. Yes, this was definitely the right house, the same Victorian home where my grandmother had lived for 60 years, and where I'd spent every summer of my childhood. The house I was supposed to inherit. My name is Morgan Fitzgerald, and I was about to discover that blood isn't always thicker than paper. I set my suitcase down and tried one last time. When the lock still refused to budge, I reluctantly pressed the doorbell. From inside came the muffled sound of footsteps, then the click of the deadbolt turning. The door swung open, and there stood my older brother, Ethan. He looked exactly as I'd expected, his salt and pepper hair meticulously styled, his Oxford shirt perfectly pressed, his expression a careful mixture of surprise and feigned delight. "Morgan. You're early," he said, blocking the doorway. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." I frowned. "My flight got in last night. I texted you. Must have missed it." His smile didn't reach his eyes, those Fitzgerald green eyes we'd both inherited from our grandmother. Come in, come in. I was just sorting through some paperwork." He stepped aside to let me enter, and I immediately noticed the changes. The antique console table where Grandma Lillian had always kept fresh flowers was now covered with cardboard file boxes. The familiar smell of her lavender sachets had been replaced by the chemical scent of furniture polish. And the portrait of our grandfather that had hung in the entryway for decades was gone. "You've been busy," I remarked, setting my suitcase by the stairs. "Just getting things in order." Ethan closed the door behind me. "The lawyer's coming tomorrow to finalize everything." "Mr. Donovan?" I thought the reading of the will wasn't for another week. A flicker of something, annoyance? Worry, crossed Ethan's face. "Different lawyer. From Boston. Specialized in estate transfers." He gestured toward the kitchen. "Coffee?" I followed him, noting more changes as we went. Grandma's collection of antique teacups was missing from the hutch. The worn oriental runner in the hallway had been replaced by something cream-colored and aggressively modern. "How long have you been here?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. Ethan busied himself with the coffee maker, a sleek, chrome monstrosity that looked wildly out of place in Grandma's old-fashioned kitchen. "About a week. Flew in right after the funeral." "The funeral you didn't tell me about until after it happened," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. His shoulders tensed. "We've been over this, Morgan. I tried to reach you. Not my fault you were off the grid in, where was it again? Guatemala. Working on a water access project. You know, the one I've been planning for a year?" I crossed my arms. "The one I told the whole family about at Christmas." Right. He waved dismissively. Well, Grandma understood the importance of being present for family. She wouldn't have wanted a big production anyway. I bit back a sharp retort. Fighting with Ethan wouldn't bring Grandma Lillian back, and it certainly wouldn't honor her memory. "So," I said instead, "what's all this paperwork you're sorting through?" Ethan handed me a mug of coffee, his movements precise, controlled. "Just getting the estate in order. You know how these things go." I didn't, actually. Despite being 32 years old, I'd never dealt with a death in the family before. Both our parents were still alive, albeit divorced and remarkably absent from our lives. Grandma Lillian had been our true north, our touchstone. Her passing had left a void I wasn't sure either of us knew how to fill. "Did she suffer?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me for weeks. Ethan's face softened, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of genuine emotion. No. In her sleep. Peaceful. I nodded, grateful for that small mercy. And the house? What happens to it now? A strange look crossed his face. Well, that's what we're finalizing tomorrow. The transfer of ownership. Transfer to whom? I asked, suddenly alert. He sipped his coffee, avoiding my gaze. To me, of course. As the oldest. I set my mug down with a thunk, coffee sloshing over the rim. What? Grandma always said the house would go to both of us. She made that clear for years. Well, things change, Morgan. His tone was patronizing, as if explaining something simple to a child. Legal documents supersede verbal promises. What legal documents? He sighed. Look, I didn't want to get into this right away, but since you're asking, Grandma signed the house over to me last year. It's all legal and binding. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. That's impossible. Grandma would never do that without telling me. She was old, Morgan. 87. Her memory wasn't what it used to be. He shrugged. Maybe she meant to tell you. Maybe she forgot. I stared at him, a terrible suspicion taking root. I want to see these documents. They're with the lawyer. Then I want to speak to this lawyer. Tomorrow. Ethan's jaw tightened. That won't be necessary. Everything's in order. I'll be the judge of that. I picked up my suitcase. Which bedroom am I in? The blue room, he said, referring to the smallest guest bedroom, the one furthest from Grandma's master suite. I've already moved into Grandma's room. Of course he had. As I climbed the stairs, a memory surfaced, Grandma Lillian, just 8 months ago, taking my hand in her papery one. This house has been in our family for generations, she'd said. When I'm gone, it'll be yours and Ethan's. Promise me you'll keep it in the family. I had promised. And now, it seemed, that promise was in jeopardy. In the blue room, I set my suitcase on the bed and pulled out my phone. I had some calls to make. Starting with Mr. Donovan, Grandma Lillian's longtime attorney. If anyone knew the truth about her intentions, it would be him. As I dialed his number, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was hiding something. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about my brother, and maybe about Grandma Lillian herself. I woke the next morning to the sound of voices downstairs, Ethan's and a stranger's, their conversation a muffled rhythm beneath the old house's creaking. Glancing at my phone, I saw it was just past 9 a.m. I'd missed several calls from unknown numbers while I slept, likely responses to the messages I'd left for various lawyers the night before. I showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, and headed downstairs, following the voices to Grandma's study. The door was partially open, revealing Ethan seated behind Grandma's antique cherry desk, her desk, talking to a man in an expensive-looking suit. Ah, there she is now, Ethan said, looking up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Morgan, this is Mr. Greaves, the attorney I mentioned. Mr. Greaves stood, extending a manicured hand. Ms. Fitzgerald. A pleasure. Your brother has spoken highly of you. I doubted that very much. Mr. Greaves, I acknowledged, shaking his hand briefly. I understand you're handling my grandmother's estate. Aspects of it, yes. He gestured to the papers spread across the desk. We were just reviewing the deed transfer. I moved closer, trying to get a better look at the documents. I'd like to review those as well, if you don't mind. Mr. Greaves glanced at Ethan, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Of course, the lawyer said, sliding a document toward me. This is the quitclaim deed your grandmother signed last year, transferring ownership of the property to your brother. I picked up the paper, scanning it carefully. There it was, Grandma Lillian's familiar signature at the bottom, dated 14 months ago. But something about it felt off. And witnesses? I asked, noting the two other signatures on the page. Myself and my paralegal, Mr. Greaves said smoothly. Everything is in perfect order, I assure you. I studied the document more closely. The signature looked like Grandma's, but there was something not quite right about it. The way the L and Lillian curved, the pressure on the downstrokes, subtle differences that most people wouldn't notice. But I had spent years studying Grandma's handwriting, tracing her recipe cards with my finger as a child, reading her letters during my college years abroad. This signature was close, but it wasn't hers. I'd like a copy of this, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Of course, Mr. Greaves replied. Though I'm not sure what purpose. For my records, I interrupted. And I'd also like to speak with Mr. Donovan about the will reading next week. Ethan's smile tightened. Mr. Donovan is semi-retired, Morgan. That's why we're working with Mr. Greaves now. More efficient. I see. I handed the document back to Mr. Greaves. Then I'll need Mr. Donovan's contact information. I'd like to speak with him directly. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Finally, Ethan sighed dramatically. Morgan, always the suspicious one. Fine. His number is in Grandma's old address book. In the kitchen drawer. Help yourself. I nodded and turned to leave. Oh, and Morgan? Ethan called after me. We're hosting a small gathering here tomorrow evening. Some of Grandma's old friends, a few neighbors. I'd appreciate it if you could make yourself scarce. Emotions are still raw, and I don't want anything to disrupt the healing process. Translation: he didn't want me questioning his claim to the house in front of witnesses. I wouldn't dream of it, I said with a sweetness that matched his insincerity. In fact, I have some errands to run today. Don't wait up. In the kitchen, I found Grandma's address book exactly where Ethan had said it would be. I flipped to D and quickly located Mr. Donovan's entry, home, office, and cell numbers all listed in Grandma's neat handwriting. I copied the information into my phone, then, on impulse, flipped to H for Holloway, Grandma's neighbor and best friend for over 40 years. If anyone knew about Grandma's true intentions, it would be Eleanor Holloway. Armed with both numbers, I grabbed my purse and car keys. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to find them in this house with Ethan breathing down my neck. As I headed for the door, a framed photo on the wall caught my eye. It was an old black and white image of the house, taken shortly after my great-grandparents had purchased it in 1921. Scrawled across the bottom in faded ink was a message, to the Fitzgerald line, "May this home shelter generations to come. With love, Eleanor and William." I touched the frame gently. This house wasn't just property to be fought over. It was our history, our legacy. And I was increasingly certain that Ethan was trying to steal it from under my nose. Not if I could help it. Eleanor Holloway's colonial-style home looked exactly as I remembered it, white clapboard with black shutters, a wraparound porch filled with potted geraniums, and a bright blue door that had scandalized the more conservative neighbors when she'd painted it in the 1970s. I rang the bell, hearing the familiar Westminster chimes echo inside. Moments later, the door opened to reveal Eleanor herself, 92 years old but still standing tall, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes sharp behind tortoiseshell glasses. Morgan Fitzgerald, she said, a smile lighting up her face. About time you showed up. I stepped into her embrace, inhaling the familiar scent of Shalimar perfume. I'm sorry, Mrs. Holloway. I came as soon as I could. Eleanor, please. We're not standing on ceremony at my age. She ushered me inside. Come in, come in. I've just made a pot of Earl Grey. I followed her into the kitchen, which was as warm and inviting as I remembered. A plate of lemon cookies, my favorite, sat on the table beside two delicate china cups. You were expecting me, I said, taking a seat. Eleanor poured the tea with steady hands. Of course I was. I've been watching that brother of yours come and go all week, bringing in strangers, removing furniture. Not at all what Lillian would have wanted. My heart quickened. So you don't believe Grandma signed the house over to Ethan? Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. Is that what he's claiming? Nonsense. Lillian would never do such a thing. She pushed the plate of cookies toward me. She loved you both equally. Always said the house would belong to both of you, to preserve the family legacy. That's what I thought too. But Ethan has documents, a quitclaim deed with Grandma's signature. Dated last year. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Impossible. Lillian and I spoke every day last year. She never mentioned signing over her house. And believe me, that would have been a topic of conversation. I took a sip of tea, the familiar warmth soothing my frayed nerves. I think Ethan forged her signature. But proving it will be difficult. Not as difficult as you might think. Eleanor set down her cup with a decisive clink. Lillian suspected something like this might happen. What do you mean? Eleanor reached for her cane and stood. Come with me. I followed her to a small study off the main hallway. Inside, a polished oak desk dominated the room, covered with neatly stacked papers and correspondence. Eleanor opened the top drawer and withdrew a sealed envelope. Lillian gave me this 6 months ago. Said if anything happened to her, I should give it to you, and only you. Not Ethan. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. It was addressed simply to Morgan in Grandma's unmistakable handwriting. Did she say what was in it? I asked. Eleanor shook her head. Only that it was important. That it would protect you both, in the end. I carefully opened the envelope and removed a single sheet of paper. It was a letter, written in Grandma's elegant script. My dearest Morgan. If you're reading this, then I am gone, and things have likely unfolded as I feared they might. Your brother has always been ambitious, but in recent years, I've seen a change in him that troubles me deeply. Last month, I discovered that someone had been through my personal papers. Nothing was missing, but things were not as I'd left them. I suspect Ethan was looking for my will, or perhaps practicing my signature. I write this to warn you, but also to arm you. I have taken precautions to ensure that my true wishes are carried out. The house belongs to both of you equally, as I have always intended. But there is more at stake than just the property. Beneath the floorboards in my bedroom closet, you will find a safe. The combination is your birthday, month, day, year. Inside is everything you need to challenge any fraudulent claims Ethan might make. Trust Mr. Donovan. He knows the truth, and has copies of all the relevant documents. Remember that I love you both, even when Ethan loses his way. The house is important, yes, but more important is the truth. And forgiveness, when the time is right. With all my love. Grandma Lillian. I read the letter twice, tears blurring my vision. She knew, I whispered. She knew what Ethan was planning. Eleanor nodded solemnly. Lillian was sharp as a tack right up to the end. Not much got past her. I carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I need to get into the house. Into her bedroom. That might be difficult if Ethan's already moved in there, Eleanor mused. But I might be able to help with that too. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Lillian gave me a spare set years ago, for emergencies. Said neighbors should look out for each other. I'd say this qualifies. I took the keys, gratitude washing over me. Thank you, Eleanor. For everything. Don't thank me yet, she replied, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Thank me when you've put that brother of yours in his place. Lillian would have wanted you to fight for what's right. As I left Eleanor's house, letters safely tucked in my purse and keys clutched in my hand, I knew one thing for certain: Grandma Lillian had foreseen this battle, and she'd armed me for the fight. All I had to do now was find that safe. I sat in my rental car outside Grandma's house, watching as Ethan loaded file boxes into the trunk of his sleek black Audi. He glanced at his watch, then back at the house, his movements hurried, almost furtive. Finally, he slammed the trunk shut, got in the driver's seat, and pulled out of the driveway. I waited until his car disappeared around the corner before making my move. Using Eleanor's key, I let myself in through the back door, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away even though the house was empty. I moved quickly to the staircase, then up to the second floor. Grandma's bedroom door was closed. I turned the knob slowly, expecting it to be locked, but it opened with ease. Inside, the room had been transformed. Grandma's floral bedspread had been replaced with a stark white duvet. Her collection of antique perfume bottles was gone from the vanity. Ethan's expensive luggage was stacked neatly in one corner. I made my way to the walk-in closet. Ethan's suits hung where Grandma's dresses had once been. Her shoes had been replaced by his polished leather Oxfords. I knelt down, running my hands along the hardwood floor, searching for any sign of loose boards. Nothing. I moved deeper into the closet, toward the back corner where Grandma had kept her winter boots and old hat boxes. There, beneath a shoe rack, I found what I was looking for: a small irregularity in the flooring, a seam that didn't quite match the others. Using my fingernails, I pried up the board, revealing a small floor safe embedded in the concrete below. My hands shook as I dialed the combination: 0-6-1-9-8-9. My birthday, just as Grandma had written. The lock clicked, and the safe door swung open. Inside was a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out, heart racing, and opened it to find a stack of documents. On top was a sealed letter addressed to the estate of Morgan Fitzgerald in Grandma's handwriting, with "to be opened only in the presence of Morgan and Ethan Fitzgerald" written beneath. Under that was a copy of Grandma's will, the real one, dated just 3 months ago. I skimmed it quickly, my breath catching at the key provision: "I leave my house and all its contents to my grandchildren, Morgan and Ethan Fitzgerald, to be owned jointly and equally between them." There was more: bank statements, property records, and photos of the house dating back decades. But what caught my eye was a document at the very bottom of the stack. It was a handwriting analysis report, comparing various samples of Grandma's signature with what appeared to be forgeries. Grandma hadn't just suspected Ethan's betrayal, she'd documented it. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor: "He's on his way back. Saw his car turn onto Pine Street." I quickly replaced the floorboard, making sure it sat flush with the others, then tucked the envelope into my bag. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard a key in the front door. Too late. Ethan stepped inside, stopping short when he saw me on the staircase. "Morgan," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I thought you were out." I was. I continued down the stairs, forcing a casual smile. "Just got back. Needed to grab a sweater." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Find what you were looking for?" "I did, thanks." I patted my bag, watching his gaze follow the movement. "Good." He set his briefcase down by the door. "I just came back to get some papers I forgot. I have another meeting with Mr. Greaves this afternoon." He paused, studying my face. "You know, about the house." "Of course," I said, matching his faux politeness. "Don't let me keep you." He hesitated, as if debating whether to say more, then moved toward the study. "I'll be out again in a few minutes. Feel free to make yourself at home." The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. "Oh, I will." I headed for the front door. "Actually, I have an appointment myself. With Mr. Donovan." I watched his back stiffen, his hand pause on the study doorknob. "Mr. Donovan," he repeated, turning slowly to face me. "What for?" I shrugged. "Just tying up loose ends. You know how it is." "Morgan," he took a step toward me, his voice hardening. "I told you, everything's been handled. There's no need to involve Donovan." "Funny thing about lawyers," I said, opening the front door. "They tend to be rather particular about wills and signatures and such. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about, if everything's as legitimate as you say." I stepped outside before he could respond, my heart hammering in my chest. The game was on, and Ethan knew it. Now I just needed to get these documents to Mr. Donovan before Ethan could intercept me. Mr. Donovan's law office occupied the second floor of a historic brick building in the center of town. The reception area was wood-paneled and dignified, with leather chairs and brass lamps that looked as if they'd been there since the firm's founding in 1892. The receptionist, a woman in her 60s with a kind face and shrewd eyes, looked up as I entered. "May I help you?" "Morgan Fitzgerald to see Mr. Donovan." "I believe he's expecting me." She checked her appointment book, then smiled. "Yes, Ms. Fitzgerald. He's been waiting for you. Go right in." Mr. Donovan stood as I entered his office. He was older than I remembered, more stooped, his hair whiter, but his handshake was firm, and his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Morgan," he said warmly. "It's been too long. Please, have a seat." I settled into a chair across from his desk, taking in the familiar surroundings. Mr. Donovan had been Grandma Lillian's attorney for over 40 years, and his office reflected that longevity, leather-bound legal tomes, framed degrees yellowing with age, and a silver-framed photo of himself with Grandma at a charity event, both of them decades younger. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," I began. "I'm afraid we have a situation." His expression grew serious. "Regarding your grandmother's estate, I presume?" I nodded, pulling the manila envelope from my bag. "Ethan claims Grandma signed the house over to him last year. He has a quitclaim deed with what appears to be her signature." Mr. Donovan's bushy eyebrows shot up. "That's simply not true. Your grandmother would never." "I know," I interrupted gently. "Grandma left me this." I slid the envelope across his desk. I found it exactly where her letter said it would be. He opened the envelope and began reviewing the contents, his frown deepening as he read. When he came to the sealed letter addressed to the estate of Lillian Fitzgerald, he looked up sharply. "I have an identical copy of this in my safe," he said. "Your grandmother gave it to me 3 months ago, with explicit instructions that it be opened only at the formal reading of her will, with both you and Ethan present. And when is that scheduled for? Next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Though I suspect your brother may try to prevent it from happening. Mr. Donovan shuffled through the remaining documents, pausing at the handwriting analysis. This is troubling. Very troubling indeed. Can we stop him? I asked. Legally, I mean. Mr. Donovan removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully with a handkerchief. The deed he's presented is a forgery. Clear and simple. That's a criminal offense. He put his glasses back on and leaned forward. But proving it will require this evidence, plus testimony from a handwriting expert. We'll need to move quickly, before he can transfer the property. He's meeting with his lawyer this afternoon, I said. Mr. Greaves from Boston. Mr. Donovan's face darkened. Sebastian Greaves. I know him by reputation. He specializes in creative interpretations of estate law. Not the sort of attorney your grandmother would ever have engaged. He picked up his phone. Margaret, please clear my schedule for the rest of the day. And get Judge Harmon on the line, tell her it's urgent. He turned back to me. We're going to file for an emergency injunction to prevent any transfer of property until after the will reading. And I'm going to have a forensic document examiner review these materials immediately. Relief washed over me. Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Don't thank me yet, he replied grimly. Your brother has clearly gone to great lengths to secure your grandmother's property. He may not give up easily. I don't understand, I said, the question that had been nagging at me finally surfacing. Why do this? Ethan has a successful investment career in New York. He doesn't need Grandma's house. Mr. Donovan's expression softened. It's not about the house itself, Morgan. It's about what the house represents. What do you mean? He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. Your grandmother preserved certain information in her will. Information she thought both you and Ethan should have. He gestured to the sealed letter. I suspect that's what this contains as well. What kind of information? That's not for me to say. Not yet. He gathered the documents back into the envelope. But I can tell you this, your grandmother was a remarkable woman who believed in justice and fairness above all else. She would not want her legacy tarnished by dishonesty, even from her own grandson. As I left Mr. Donovan's office, his words echoed in my mind. What information could be so important that Ethan would commit forgery to keep it hidden? And why did Grandma Lillian wait until after her death to reveal it? I had a feeling the answers lay in that sealed letter, the one that could only be opened with both Ethan and myself present. Somehow, I had to make sure that reading took place, despite my brother's best efforts to prevent it. The battle for Grandma's house was about more than property now. It was about truth, and whatever secret Ethan was so desperate to keep buried. When I returned to the house, Ethan was waiting for me in the living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Where have you been? He asked, his voice controlled but tense. Out, I replied, hanging my coat on the rack by the door. I told you, I had an appointment. With Donovan. It wasn't a question. Among others. I moved into the living room, maintaining a careful distance between us. You've been busy while I was gone. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. Had to cancel my meeting with Greaves. Seems there's a complication with the deed transfer. Is that so? I kept my expression neutral. A temporary injunction. He took a sip of whiskey, his eyes never leaving my face. Nothing serious. Just a formality until the estate is settled. Interesting timing. He set his glass down with a decisive click. Let's stop playing games, Morgan. I know you went to Donovan. I know you're challenging the deed. And I know you forged Grandma's signature, I countered. So I guess we're both in the know. A muscle twitched in his jaw. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. Grandma made sure of it. For a moment, genuine surprise flashed across his face, quickly replaced by skepticism. What are you talking about? She knew what you were up to, Ethan. She documented everything, the forgery attempts, your searches through her papers. She even had a handwriting analysis done. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's ridiculous. Grandma was half senile toward the end. She was imagining things. We both know that's not true. She was sharp as ever. I took a step closer, anger bubbling up despite my efforts to remain calm. What I don't understand is why. Why go to these lengths? The house would have been half yours anyway. Something flickered in his eyes, pain? Fear, before he turned away. You wouldn't understand. Try me. He moved to the window, staring out at the twilight-shrouded garden. It's not about the house. Not really. Then what? He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was almost unrecognizable, hollow, defeated. It's about what's in the will. What Grandma was planning to tell us. And what was that? I pressed. He shook his head. I can't. It doesn't matter now. The injunction changes things. He turned back to face me, his expression hardening once more. But this isn't over, Morgan. I still have options. So do I replied. Including pressing charges for forgery. You wouldn't. Try me, I challenged. The will reading is next Tuesday. Be there, Ethan. For both our sakes. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. You don't know what you're doing, Morgan. Some things are better left buried. I looked back at him, seeing not the polished, successful man he pretended to be, but the frightened little boy I remembered from our childhood, the one who'd hide in the closet during thunderstorms, who'd cry when our parents fought. Maybe, I conceded. But that's not your decision to make. Not anymore. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned in the unfamiliar guest bed, my mind racing with questions. What could possibly be in Grandma's will that would drive Ethan to such desperate measures? What secret was he trying to protect? Around midnight, I heard him leave the house, the front door closing with a soft click, followed by the sound of his car starting up. Curious, I went to the window and watched as his headlights receded down the driveway. On impulse, I decided to search his room. If he was hiding something, perhaps there would be clues among his belongings. I crept down the hall to Grandma's bedroom, Ethan's now, and pushed open the door. The moonlight streaming through the windows was enough to see by as I made my way to the desk in the corner. I tried the drawers first, finding them locked. No surprise there. Next, I checked the nightstand, the dresser, even under the mattress, but found nothing of interest. I was about to give up when I noticed a leather portfolio peeking out from beneath the bed. I pulled it out and carried it to the window, where the moonlight was strongest. Inside were more legal documents, copies of the forged deed, correspondence with Mr. Greaves, and something that made my blood run cold, a draft obituary for Grandma Lillian, dated 3 months before her actual death. Had Ethan been planning this for that long? The thought was chilling. At the back of the portfolio, I found a folded newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. It was an article from the local paper, dated over 40 years ago. Local man dies in tragic accident. The story described how William Fitzgerald, our grandfather, had died in a car crash on a rainy night in April 1978. What caught my eye was a paragraph near the end. The deceased is survived by his wife, Lillian, and their son, Robert. The family requests privacy during this difficult time. Robert. Our father. But what was strange about this article was what it didn't mention, any hint of scandal or foul play. Just a straightforward report of a tragic accident. So why had Ethan kept it? And what did it have to do with Grandma's will? I carefully replaced the clipping in the portfolio and returned everything exactly as I'd found it. Whatever Ethan was hiding, it was connected to our grandfather's death somehow, and to our father. Back in my room, I tried piecing together what I knew. Grandma Lillian had left something in her will, information that Ethan was desperate to suppress. Information connected to our grandfather's death 4 decades ago. The puzzle was starting to take shape, but crucial pieces were still missing. As I finally drifted off to sleep, one thought remained clear: Tuesday's will reading would reveal everything, one way or another. I just had to make sure Ethan didn't find a way to prevent it from happening. The days leading up to Tuesday's will reading were filled with a tense, brittle silence. Ethan and I moved through the house like ghosts, avoiding each other when possible, exchanging only the most necessary words when not. He spent most of his time on the phone, his voice a low, urgent murmur behind closed doors. I caught fragments of his conversations, legal terms, references to complications, and once, when he thought I was out, a desperate "you promised you'd take care of this." Monday evening found me in Grandma's garden, seeking solace among her beloved roses. The sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson, casting long shadows across the carefully tended beds. "Thought I might find you out here." I turned to see Eleanor Holloway making her way down the garden path, a casserole dish in her hands. "Brought you some dinner," she said, holding out the dish. "For strength. Tomorrow's the big day." "Thank you," I said, taking it gratefully. "I'm not sure I could eat, though." Eleanor settled beside me on the garden bench. "Nervous?" "Terrified," I admitted. "Whatever's in that will, it's important enough that Ethan tried to steal the entire estate to keep it hidden." Eleanor's gaze drifted to the roses, their petals glowing in the fading light. "Lillian always said truth is like these flowers, beautiful, necessary, but sometimes with thorns that can draw blood." As darkness fell over the garden, I steeled myself for whatever tomorrow would bring. The will reading wasn't just about inheriting a house anymore, it was about uncovering a truth so powerful that it had driven my brother to betray everything our grandmother stood for. Whatever secrets lay dormant in those sealed envelopes, by this time tomorrow, they would finally see the light of day.